And I'm Charlotte Haynes, and I'm a resident of North Carolina, but I'm living next to Laura. My farm's next to Laura's place in Virginia. I've had that farm for about 30-some years now. And I'm going to tell you more of a story of it, a grassroots effort in our community. But it does tie into what Laura's doing and new people coming. It's a great place to live. We have water, it's inexpensive, and it's beautiful, and it's within 500 miles of half the population in the United States. So it's a new way of living, and a lot of people like this lifestyle. So speaking first on Rachel's Network, it's an organization started by Winsome McIntosh, and the money came from the McIntosh Foundation. It's named after Rachel Carson. It's Women in Conservation. There's about 80 of us, and of the 80% have their own foundation. And of the 80 that are in it, I'd say 20% have a business or more than one business. Some of them own large businesses. NRDC head Francis Bernanke is one of our members, and the list is it's a pretty powerful group of women. They're very active, and they all have their own passion and their own organization that they're supporting. When we get together, it's kind of an unspoken rule that you don't go up and say, you know, you give my organization, I'll give you yours type situation, because that would mess up our meeting. We only meet twice a year, and if somebody is presenting and you're interested, and you can talk to them later or do something like that, but we do go to Washington once a year, and we lobby, and we're very effective because we have power. And in fact, some of the women in the organization have bought stock in companies just so they can go in and vote and make resolutions and proposals. And one of the things we're working on right now is antibiotic resistance in animals. And you've seen a lot come out in the news lately, and I want to give credit to my organization because we have worked on it really hard for the past 18 months. We put out movies and films, and the movie Resistance was part of a lady in our organization. So I think we're effective, and we have staff of 5 great ladies, and they keep us connected by, if they hear something in the news, that's their job, is to look through the news every day and connect. If I'm interested in the antibiotic program, or if I'm interested in money and politics, they connect me. I'm in a circle group. My circle group talks about it. So it's a lot of internet connection, but it's the same thing we've been talking about already at this conference, is all the connections, how we can make them, social media. It works. And you know, the reason we're playing the money game is because money and greed is what's running our government. It's what the corporations are doing, and so we're trying to just play their game. We have a circle group that's called Invest Divest, and that's in fossil fuels. And so we've taken probably $9 million just in our organization away from fossil fuel investment. And that makes a difference. We need to do that. And these women lost money doing it, but they're investing in technology, and they will get their money back. It'll happen. You know, it's called doing well while doing good. So I really enjoy this organization a lot. We go on a retreat once a year outside of Washington to different cities and towns and submerge ourselves in what's going on there. We all had to buy a sturgeon when we went to Milwaukee and doing stuff like that. We have a good time. A friend of mine has started a music school in Africa, and she did that because she felt so compassionate about what we've done to the black people in our country by bringing them over as slaves. So she wanted to do something for Africa. And so she went to the place where they took a whole lot of slaves, I think it was Benin. And these people are very musical, and she started this school, and just dedicated so much time to it. Several members involved in the rainforest work. Heifer International, one of the founders, who's in our group. And the group just goes on and on like that. It costs $5,000 a year to pay membership to be a Rachel's Network member. We do have some scholarships, and we do have Ashoka's. Does anybody know what the Ashoka organization? Yeah.
I don't know what that is.
We sponsor 2 of them. It's an organization, ASHOKAS, and they're young people, like mostly young people, that have entrepreneurial ideas and are making a difference. They need the money to back them. And so we sponsor at least 2 of them. They have more now. But,
Social entrepreneurs, they call them.
Yes.
We're doing social work, and they're multiplying it. They're making it happen for more and more people.
they just, Janelle Orsley is one of ours, and she's out in California, Berkeley, a young lawyer. And all these young lawyers that can't find jobs, she's creating jobs and showing them, and she's just done a fantastic job. So that's Rachel's Network. And if you have more questions, look at the webpage or whatever, contact me, anything like that. As in one area of Rachel's Network, the Agriculture Circle, I'm on it because I'm a farmer. And I also work with American Farmland Trust on a program that, because in only 10 years, over half the land in the United States is going to be owned by women. And so it's women in agriculture. And Laurel kind of wanted me to speak on that, but that's just a whole different ballgame. And then American Farmland Trust, it's mainly women in agriculture who don't live on the farm. It's non-resident owners. So I'm a resident owner.
What was that statistic by when?
In 10 years, over half the land in the United States will be owned by women.
That is so
Women are from Venus, so what better thing could happen? And that also brings up farm link programs that our land care in Grayson County is involved with, and I'm going to touch on that a little bit later. But there's so many people that are farm wannabes, and my friend Zach here is from Grayson County, and he's going, why do people want to come back to the farm? He's working on my farm, and he's like, it's not that much fun. And he's been to Australia, and he wants to know why you're moving back to Virginia. So we all want what we don't have, I guess. But the farm link programs are very interesting, and it's going to take a long time to talk about all that. But because of time, I want to speak on my experiences just starting this farm, and then Lila's going to speak more on water and Leela.
It looks like Lila.
Never mind. Leela. Beautiful. Okay. On water and more of the international things. She has a great PowerPoint. But a quick story. I was a physical therapist, minding my own business. My senior project, four of my girlfriends and our neuroscience instructor, we did a project stimulating the caudate nucleus in cats to produce chorea and athetotic movements in cats. And it was a very cruel thing to do with cats. But we did publish it, and the Academy of Neuroscience invited us to their convention in Toronto, Canada. So here are these seniors in physical therapy, going, oh yeah, we're going to do. And of the 1,000 people that presented there, they picked 100 to present their projects, and we got picked. And so we're sitting in the audience, and this guy, I'll never forget, Dr. Thomas Chase from NIH, this big panel up here, you look up at him, and they're on stage, and my maiden name was Metz, and you get, Miss Metz, in the microphone, it was like the Land of Oz, you know, that guy behind the curtain, oh, look behind the curtain. And so I had to go out to the microphone, and I got out to the microphone, and he goes, we in the neurosciences would like to know why you physical therapists feel like you're qualified to tap the neurosciences. I said, ooh. And I get, Dr. Chase, we never said we were qualified. We just get all the patients you can't cure. So I'm in farming, and I'm not saying I'm qualified, but I can tell you what I've been scratching around with. Okay, this is what we're doing. I married a very interesting man, R. Philip Haynes Jr. When I was 35, and he was 24 years older than me, and he said, let's do something we don't know anything about. I said, oh, that sounds like fun. He had been in the arts, in textiles, and in conservation. And I'd just been in medicine and having fun and partying. But, so he had already done some things in conservation. He said, I've got some land on the New River, and I want to preserve it. I want to, get everybody that owns land on the New River in this area to put conservation easements on. I thought, that's a great project. And so we started this, and the farm agent told us, we said, who makes money on farming? I think most of you heard this joke that I started out a millionaire. My farm made a millionaire out of me, and you go, really? And he said, yeah, well, how did you do that? I said, well, I was a multi-millionaire. And so farming in this country is considered a loss. You own a farm, you can't make money. In Europe, if you say you have 100 acres, you're like, wow, you got 100 acres, you can do something with that. But the attitude in this country is wrong. I mean, our culture needs to change because you can survive. Now, you might not drive a Mercedes, but you can survive. And so I started talking to these people to do conservation easements, and they're real nice, aren't they, Ron? They smile at you and nod their head, and and they're in the back of their mind, they're going, what are y'all going to do? They're not going to do it. They're Scottish, I mean, they're really stubborn, and a lot of them, and Zach comes from Gary comes from a family that's land trust family, not land trust, land grant families, that's what they call them. And they were given this land 200 years ago, passed down from generation to generation. It gets split up a lot. But they feel obligated to take care of this land no matter what, no matter how much money they lose, no matter what. Well, I think most of you probably know the story of what came into the area was factories, textiles, and furniture factories years ago, say 50, 60, 70 years ago. These factories came in, and they took the people off the farm, and they thought, we can run the farm and work 8 hours a day, and everything's going to be fine. We can make more money. But the farms went downhill, the infrastructure went downhill, and so we just never had productive farms. And you had industrial farming that came along that made it way too competitive for small farmers to make any money. I mean, if you just had 20 head of cattle, you're competing with these big feedlots and stuff. So the farms just started going downhill. So when we got onto the farm, we asked our farm agent, who was Danny Boyer, to come, and young man, and said, who in the whole world makes money on farming? He said, I believe New Zealand does. So my husband, being the crazy man he is, we went to New Zealand for 5 weeks and stayed with 5 different farm families. And he wrote page after page, took pictures, films, everything. Oh, he just submerged himself in it. I was exhausted. And we got back and said, this is what we're going to do with our farm. Well, our farm manager at the time didn't really do that. And he wanted us to put pom-poms on cows' tails and fly in the shows or something. And we just kept saying, we want to do rotational grazing. We want to do sustainable. He's going, oh, why do you want to do that? And the hardest thing I ever had to do was fire this man. He had been there for 17 years when we bought the farm. And it was just really, really hard to do. We found him another job, and we did get rid of him. We hired a local guy. He started out doing well, but then when my husband got sick, he started to run the farm the way he wanted to. But one of the biggest things that changed me is that the first time I saw him gathering up all the calves, and again, I'm on this learning curve, and they separate them from the mothers, and everybody's crying. They put the calves on this truck, too deep. And I said, where are we going? They said, they'll end up in a feedlot somewhere. I said, what do you mean, end up? They said, well, some of them go here, some of them go there. Some of them go to these middlemen, they buy them and they give them hormones and put weight on them, and then they sell them. And they do all this stuff, and I was just, I had no idea, not a clue. And everybody was crying, and the mothers cried for days, and I said, well, they don't have any water on that truck. And they said, yeah, some of them die. Yeah, it was just a casual thing, some of them die. I was going, God, that's awful. Also, I can have some meat to eat. Well, there's different levels, because I obviously still have a beef operation, but I feel like my cattle only suffer one day out of the year. They live on a beautiful place and they eat right. And as long as you don't kick them around, okay. Yeah, they kick back, okay. So that's what got me started in saying, what can I do differently? And it's just, I looked at direct marketing. And it's a circle just like Barbara's circle and Laura's circle is that I drew up a thing that said economics, and that involved the direct marketing. The only places that make money on our is Christmas trees in our area, and that's certainly not sustainable. It's pretty awful business. And so if these people are going to keep their farms, they need to do something to make enough money to keep them. So I wanted to be a model that they could follow. Action speaks louder than words. Some of the problems ended up being with the government because we had a comprehensive plan that was drawn up only one time and it had never been revisited. And the number one business in our county is agriculture, and the whole comprehensive plan had no focus on agriculture. So we had to get, and I say we because Laura's involved in some of this too, is we had to get representatives in, and to get people voted in, you have to be involved in politics. So politics is part of our wheel, and government. And estate planning is just all messed up there because you have a big, beautiful farm that started out 1,000 acres and it got divided up between 3 kids and then 4 kids. I mean, it's little. It's not functional anymore. And so through our land care program, we try to offer some free counseling and money to go see lawyers to set up. But people don't want to talk about dying. It's just like, no. But we're making our steps and we're getting there. And of course the education, the land management, I said we do rotational grazing or low intensity sustainable agriculture. We have to have water systems. People say, you know, why don't you move your cattle closer together and rotate them every other day? Well, in our hills, we just don't have water available in all the places. And we use a CREP program, it's a government-funded program that will, if you put your water system in, hand them the bills, they'll pay about 80% of it back to you. So it's a good program, but people in our area say, I don't want the government having anything to do with my land. And I'm going, if you don't take the money, somebody else will. Take it. It's there. Do it. But I did it. And now, Laura, don't you see more people with those little trees with tubes in them and everything around the county because they're catching on a little bit. Said, oh.
See them all when you kayak down the river now.
Yeah.
At your place.
Yeah. But you'll see them spread out through the county now. So we've done that. One of the friends that we met in New Zealand came, Dr. Vaughn Jones, who's an expert on forages. And we had the people from Virginia Tech, I guess I can say that, over at Bradford, but Dr. Jones is QC could be, and we were riding around in a van, it was August, and he kept saying, that's a bad farm, that's a terrible farm. And the professors and everybody were sitting there, they're mad at him, and they said, look, it's August, it hasn't rained, this is our dry season, the grass always turns brown, this is the way it looks. And he said, how come the grass on the side of the road is so green? And everybody went, oh, it is. It's green as it can be. It's brown, it's dead in the pasture. Somebody didn't manage it right. Did the highway department manage that grass? What'd they do? They watered it? No, they didn't water it. All they did was cut it. They don't fertilize it or anything. They cut it. They kept it from going to seed, and it stayed green, and it's got a root system 3 times what the grass in the field does. It's management. And so if you manage your land, you're going to have better pastures. People say it rains more on my farm. I don't know, but you know, I get a lot of grass. Don't we? We got more grass than anybody, but we have ground. My farm manager, my partner, he has a lot of good ideas. So I love that story that Vaughn Jones has. In the animal genetics, if you're going to direct market your meat, you have to be growing something that is good to direct market. And it needs to be a smaller animal and this and that. So But then you got these people beating their chest and saying, I have Charlotte, or I have Longhorn, or it's just like I have a Ford, or I have a Buick, or something. I mean, you got to get that testosterone out of management. When all these women are taking care of farms, maybe we will. And we'll have animals raised in not just one species, because a lot of our chickens, I mean, they're just gone, the species are gone. It's just a white chicken everywhere, and that pig is the same everywhere. We're losing our species. So if you look at what we're doing on our farm, I've always spoken on the water systems. We're diversifying our farm finally with the hybrid cattle. We've got berries orchards coming in, and we have a wildlife program. And my husband always said we need to do agritourism because it's always cheaper to pick Yankees than to pick cotton. So I do like to do that. But the relationship of the obesity, and that's why I'm going to bring you in, it's not just poor food choices or eating all processed food that's making us all obese, or some of us obese. It's the lack of essential nutrients in food crops grown on industrial farms. And maybe we can have test tube food someday, but it's not here yet. And I don't know how much I'm going to enjoy it, but I'm open. You know, if it's going to solve some of our problems. I'm also not opposed to eating insects that other cultures would eat for good protein. But environmentally, we really can't keep producing the numbers of livestock to match the population because it's too harmful to the environment. So I'm working on it.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, have you investigated aquafarming, meaning fish?
Yes, yes.
And what was your insight?
The profits come when you can really pack them in there. And that's not good. I mean, you're going to get diseases, you're going to get fish that don't swim.
So it's too expensive to have larger tanks?
Yeah, we've got to find less expensive ways to raise them. And if you feed a fish grain, that's not their natural intake. And that's what a lot of it, because so many things are marginal these days. It's awful, and that just brings in the economics of farming.
Just to follow up on that a little bit, you mentioned that the profits are already there, you pack them in there, and that's a problem for the fish. But I thought that now there's technology where you can circulate the water through and have it go through a natural filtration system that actually takes nutrients back out of the water. And
You
then
can.
recirculate it.
You can,
And
yeah.
so that you can actually do that.
And you can do the current that makes them swim so they have,
Exactly,
but
yeah.
people are saying, why do it? Because I can make more money by not doing
By
it.
doing something else.
It gets back to the greed thing and stuff. So if you're competing with somebody that's doing it what I call right, and then you got your next door neighbors making a ton of money because they're doing it wrong. There's no regulation. It's hard to make a living when we've got that kind of competition. And so water is just key. We're in the time I've owned this land, I've seen the water just go down. We had water in each little ravine when I first bought that property. We bought pieces of property and put them together. And now to dig a well, it used to be 200 feet. Now you go 400 to 500 feet for water. And that's just in a matter of 15 years ago. And we don't have that many people moving in. So something has happened to the water. And with that,
and I'm just moving back here to the States. I'm moving to Richmond, which I'm really excited about. My mom's family is from Virginia, so this is like my stomping ground. I used to spend my summers a little bit north of Roanoke, so I'm really comfy and happy here. So in Australia, I started a nonprofit in 2005 called Future Tasmania, and we were looking at alternative futures for Tasmania around things like water, food, forests, farming, etc. But as a person that thinks these issues are important. So I probably can't answer your questions really scientifically, but I'm sort of passionate about having a healthy planet and healthy people. I work professionally as a naturopathic doctor, so I use a lot of herbal, or we call it herbal in Australia, but herbal medicine, plant medicine, and have done studies about soil health and water health in terms of growing food and medicine that really benefits the body and the mind and the spirit. So I'm going to go ahead and start. So I just want to take a minute and acknowledge the traditional owners of this land, because they've been the custodians of this land for thousands of years. So it's the Tutelo people, and if you can see in that little map, how can I do that? I asked about that. Anyway, so the Tutelo people are here, and they have now joined the Monacan tribe because there's not many in their group, but they're the traditional owners of this Radford area. So I just wanted to acknowledge them and the efforts of the indigenous cultures for in protecting and preserving the land for future generations. It's just such a beautiful tradition of honoring the Great Spirit and connecting with the land and all that's around us. So it's a really beautiful example for all of us. The second thing I wanted to say is that we're all in this together. So this is the climate change age. It's daunting. All the changes, as Charlotte was talking about, the water having to dig deeper. We're going to be facing lots of different things. But just remember that there are thousands and thousands and thousands of people around the planet working on these issues. It mentions in my bio that I did training with Al Gore in climate change in Australia, and one of the things that they've done with those of us who have been working at the, I guess you can say, cutting edge of climate change issues is to show films and get everyone together and remind us that we're not alone. And I just wanted to pass that on, that there's so many people. So we have been watched the film on how many thousands and thousands of organizations around the planet are working on this, which doesn't mean that we're off the hook. I feel like we all, as conscious citizens of the planet, need to make the right steps and stand up when necessary, but it just means that we're not alone. So we're a team, we're working together. So now I'm preparing for this talk over the last week, week and a half, I just did a quick squeeze, a quick tour on Google looking at what's been going on around the world that I thought might be of interest. So this was from earlier this week, well, it's May 24th. So in Africa, 25 million families rely on growing coffee for their livelihood. Coffee drinking and consumption has grown by 43% over the last 10 years or so. And the biggest crop of the biggest type of coffee, which is grown in Ethiopia, is now facing extinction. And they're saying that in the worst case outcome would be a 99.7% reduction in that type of coffee over the next 20 years. So they're saying if we don't do anything now, and over the next 20 years, by the end of the century, it will be extinct. So that's from climate change and drought. In India, I think people know there was a heat wave recently, over 1,000 people are dead. And roads are melting. I thought about that in terms of airplanes. Like imagine arriving on a tarmac that's melting. It's just really, really scary. In Southeast Asia, an astronaut captured massive lightning strikes in Indonesia, and recently, not in this last week, but there have been major typhoons in the Philippines. This is in China. This woman was pregnant, had a baby, and her baby had all kinds of tumors. And she believed that they were from the intense smog in China, so she put together this kind of like a TED Talk. Put together a talk on YouTube, and it's called Under the Dome. You can find it really easily. And in the first 2 days, it had 175 million views. It's just really stunning. But the issue there is that the government is not doing anything about smog pollution, so it's dangerous for the people. In Siberia, there are craters that have been just developing out of nowhere, and people thought maybe it's meteorites, what's going on? And it turns out it's the underground melting way down under the core of the earth, and these craters are forming all over the place. So there we are in Russia. In the US, I think everyone knows that we had storms recently that have killed 15 people and lots of flooding. In Canada, lots of wildfires, also from drought. In Europe, let's see, two winters ago, it was the wettest on record. And so now we're looking at some flooding across Europe over the last couple of years. Czech Republic, look at that water. Greece, Spain. In the Antarctic, recently, very, very recently, there was a sudden ice loss, which has actually affected the gravitational field of the planet because so much ice is lost. So if you imagine that we've got two poles, and we've got these frozen kind of blocks at the poles, and that's actually kind of a weight because, you know, the wobble of the world goes in a certain sort of way. And if those melt with intensity, it can actually affect how the gravitational field goes. And I didn't put it out here, but Laura actually emailed me some stuff on pole shift for the conference, and we were having a debate online about, you know, is the pole shift coming? Because the Inuit Indians, or Athabascan Indians have noticed changes that they believe is related to pole shift, but I didn't want to go into it because it's controversial. And scientists are shipping ice to the Antarctic. Now, at first I thought they were shipping it to help the Antarctic, but what it turns out is that they're preserving, you know, they study ice in, you know, in the Alps and different places by sticking very deep tubes into the ice, pulling it up, and then looking at it under a microscope to know what happened in different ages. Well, they're so worried that ice is melting, and the Antarctic is the coldest place on Earth, so they're sending down these poles, bringing up the ice, they're bringing in helicopters, sending down, and then sending these ice poles to the Antarctic in the hopes of preserving them so that they can still keep studying the different layers of ice over time. Okay, so, and then I thought we just talk briefly about Virginia because that's where we are. So precipitation's been up by 33% since 1948. Water levels are almost 2 times national levels because of increased rainfall, high temperature records over the past 3 decades. What are we doing about it? We've adopted a renewable energy goal, but I want to put emphasis on this word voluntary. Because when it's voluntary, it doesn't necessarily mean that much is actually going to happen. Oops, excuse me, I left a funny letter sticking out there, but by 2016, it's meant to increase up through 2025. Let's hope so, because right now we're ranked 39th in the nation in terms of, excuse me, I made a couple of typos on there, renewables, with only 5.1% coming from renewable energy. And I just want to compare this to Germany. You can read the stat up there. So 5.1% in Virginia, 74% in Germany. So I think we could pick up our game a little bit, but it's just something to think about.
It was basketball, it'd be great.
Yeah. So how are some of these changes happening, some of these storms and floodings and things like this? So 90% of the heat in global warming goes into the ocean. I think people already know that because the ocean absorbs the heat. And so what we see is a massive increase in ocean heat content, right? And what that does is help create storms. That heat comes off the oceans and builds up and winds form, and then we get these typhoons and various storms, which then shed water, obviously. As you can read the slide, I won't read it out. But as our temperatures increase, there's a cyclical problem that goes on. So we get these bigger, harder, probably more intense downpours, and at the same time, deeper drought. So you guys can read that. I'm not going to read it out loud to you. Just have a look. And more is there they come. You know, I have to tell you, so some of these slides come from the Al Gore slide deck, and I'm not permitted to give them out, but some of them I've made myself, so I'm really happy to share those. Okay, so is everybody ready to move on? Did you all get that?
I got a question about that.
Yeah. I may not be able to answer it, but I'll give it a go.
Well, I just noticed this from a scientific point of view.
Yeah.
Number 2 says that air is holding more water vapor. So is that going to be somewhat of a mitigation about the ocean liquid water levels rising in the air instead of being in the ocean?
Not necessarily, because because the amount of ice, like I believe in the Antarctic, for example, stacked up on top. So the Antarctic, actually, you can see the landmass underneath the ice. We've never really looked at it, but their scientists have calculated the landmass, and it's, there's actual land. Whereas in the Arctic, there was no landmass; it was just ice, right? So when it melted, you just got open ocean. Whereas in the Antarctic, there's actually land under that ice. But as of before it all started melting, we had something like 2 miles of ice stacked up. It's the coldest place on the planet. So you've got massive amount of ice stacked up on top of the landmass. When that ice melts, plus the ice in Greenland and various other places, it increases sea level rise by a considerable amount. What you're talking about here is, yes, that water's coming up into the atmosphere, but then it's coming out and it's raining. And I'll get into it later, but due to deforestation, it actually goes out because clouds like trees. I'm going to talk about it in a later slide. But when we chop down a lot of trees, what happens is that rainwater just goes over the land. Oh, there's no trees, and it just comes and dumps on the ocean again. So it doesn't necessarily, it's not necessarily going to mitigate sea level rise. Oh, that's a really good question. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, that's right. Well, I can explain my personal theory. It's not a theory that I've invented, but it's a theory that's going around. There are some people that believe that we are actually starting to see a pole shift coming. So when I first got to Australia, I arrived in 1993, and there's a magazine there called New Scientist, which is similar to American Scientist. And just when I arrived, there was this article. I've been following pole shift for a little while, and there's this article saying, the poles have started shifting. In 1981, scientists noticed that they started shifting in their wobble, so there's a wobble. And according to the thinker P.R. Sarkar, who's a thinker from India, he's passed away now, but he said that it's possible that the pole in the North Pole will move more towards Great Britain. And Great Britain's also having very, very cold winters. So it's in theory possible. I'm not saying this is the reason, but it's in theory possible that a slight change is starting to happen, because a slight change at that level is actually, a fairly big change in terms of degrees. It's possible. I'm not saying that's what's happening. I'm just saying that's one theory that I'm sort of personally interested in, yes.
Just one additional explanation.
Yeah.
Europe, for instance, is also experiencing very cold winters.
Yes.
Is that there's actually a reversal of airflow due to warming in the Arctic areas. And so actually what's happening is colder air than would normally be experienced in these southern regions is flowing down there because there's a change in the airflow pattern due to warming of the planet.
Yes, and that's another good point. And I know that there was, at one point, the Gulf Stream stopped pumping for 10 days or something like that. Of course, one of the fears is if the Gulf Stream, so then it kicked up again, it's like a heartbeat, it's like the heart's pumping all the time, and if it stops pumping, hopefully it catches the pump again and keeps going. But if it stops pumping long enough, there's a possibility that it can't kickstart again. And then we've got a problem, because then what we have is no warm currents going up over to Europe, and so you start to get freezing in Europe.
For that?
Huh?
10 days?
Huh?
Have the date?
No, I don't have the date. I could probably find it, but I'm sorry, I don't
In the
have it.
Gulf Stream, it's being pushed lower.
The water is being pushed lower down. I'm not sure about that.
Rather than melting, I thought.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm going to keep going because we can debate all this, and at the end, there's a little question and answer. So I know that this is stimulating stuff for everybody. But we got a lot to cover. So, okay. So you guys can read those. I won't read them out loud to you. Okay, moving on. Everybody happy? More questions? I think I'm just going to keep going. We can ask questions at the end. So now this talks on water and food security, so now I'm going to focus in on those two parts of the topic. So water, what is it? Well, it's two hydrogen molecules bound to an oxygen molecule, and then they all bind to each other with covalent bonds, and you get water that sticks together, and you have more than just one molecule, you've got water. You all have probably seen these photos of this Japanese guy, and it's really interesting to me because I told you I work in health, and water crystals, this is healthy water, but when water is toxic or unhealthy, you can see that the crystals don't form very well and they look very, very sick. And so I think one of the really important points here is that we are able to drink water that's clean and healthy and good for us and is forming really beautiful crystals like that, because that helps make up the cells of our body. You all know we're, whatever they say, 80% water or whatever. So now we know water is decreasing. What are the main causes? And then their solutions. So issue one, here we go. So lack of rainfall, just plain and simple. It's raining in certain places, or it's raining quite intensely and then not raining for a while. So you get a flood, you get intense rain, but then it will be dry for quite a long time. Huh? Okay, everyone? And obviously that impacts our, so I'm calling these defects instead of problems. So the first defect is climate change. So we know we're getting hotter air, we're getting more wind. And what happens with hot air and wind is we get increased evaporation. Where it's dark colored, the sun tends to go there, it will evaporate more quickly, right? So if you go outside and you wear a white hat, it kind of reflects the sun, whereas if it's dark, it absorbs the sun. So if you think about lakes and pools and dams, they're often dark and they'll absorb the sun. So that can be an issue. So now we're looking at the globe, we're looking at drought conditions over the last, the first 10 years of the century. And that's projected, if we keep going the way we're going, 2030 to 39, 60 to 69, and the end of the century. And here's the states, first part of the century, middle, latter part, and the end. So really looking at serious drought conditions unless we can change things. The science is out that man-made climate change is a big factor here. So what are the solutions? Now we're just focusing on rainfall here, not getting sustained rain. So one of the big solutions is to catch rainwater where it falls. Because, we can't expect it to rain in certain places, so we've got to catch it when it falls, even if there's a flood. And how are we going to do that? The key point here is to dig shallow ponds that can often be fairly large in size, but are shallow. Well, it's counterintuitive because I've just said that if there's a large space, it can evaporate. But what the science says is that we don't want it to run into the ground very quickly, but it's okay for some of it to get absorbed into the ground, because what that's doing is building what? Groundwater. There we go. And so when Charlotte's talking about having to dig really deeply, you're going to start having the groundwater raised. So if you can catch that water when there's a big flood or big rain or whatever, because it might come quickly and it's gone, and it might not come now for another 3 months, So we need to have lots, and if you got land, all the more reason to have lots of shallow pools. Catch that groundwater, let it sink into the water table. This is from P.R. Sarkar's Ideal Farming, so I just put up some pickies. What's really wonderful is to establish lakes, particularly where rivulets come in. So that's a really good location, obviously, for a lake, or if you're building a pond or something like that. And then you don't want it to seep out immediately, as I said. So you can take the mud from the bottom of other lakes and put that in that lake, because that sort of mud will help prevent that really quick leakage. If you just have normal soil, it can leak out really quickly. There are 5 types of plants that are really helpful to plant around lakes. I've got all this information in this really fantastic book that I just mentioned called Ideal Farming. You can probably get it online, Ideal Farming by P.R. Sarkar. and it describes perfectly the types of plants. It describes all those types of plants, which help not only to reduce the lake, disappearing, but also help create a really good ecosystem there with clean water and to prevent runoff and things like this. And I'm really sorry you can't see that, but terrace where possible. And this is about having fish, because they help keep the water clean. Through the respiration system of fish, they actually help keep the water level constant, and they also provide a food source for birds. So you'll start to build up your ecosystem again to promote biodiversity in that area. Okay, so defect number 2. We could go into each of these topics in great detail, but we've got a time thing here, so let me just look at this here anyway. So defect number 2, can anyone guess from looking at the picture? This is why we're not getting the rain. Yeah, so deforestation. So this is a photo taken by Rob Blakers, who in Tasmania. So this is an old growth forest there, and this is the same tree. We have massive, massive destruction of old growth forests in Tasmania. Fortunately, lots of good people working on the issue, but it's very painful to see what goes on there, and massive loss of biodiversity of very beautiful animals and plants. So trees, now I'm going to focus on trees, because I think we all love trees, but trees are a major player in rain cloud formation. So how does this work? The leaves on trees actually give off volatile compounds, you can read that, that travel to the atmosphere and help form the nucleus or the core of the rain clouds. So it's things like pollen, and a new bacteria has been, or research has recently discovered that there's this bacteria called Pseudomonas syringae, which is considered to be one of the core components of that nucleus for rain clouds. And the protein in that bacteria is now known to cause snow. So this is from the New York Times from not that long ago. You can look all this up. There's studies that have been showing that it's bacteria in this. And so when we deforest, what happens is we don't have those leaves anymore, which are giving off those compounds and which are helping to create the cloud formation. So trees are really, really critical. So I would like everyone to look at this picture for a minute and to really understand this. So this thing right here, it's fuzzy because I tried to blow it up, and I'm really sorry it's out of focus, but you can see it anyway. So this is the wing of the plane, right? So that's what that weird white thing is. Because we're up in a plane looking down at Australia's rabbit-proof fence. Have people heard of it?
No.
Okay, so there was a film called The Rabbit-Proof Fence, which I would highly recommend, which is not about water conservation, it's about Indigenous Australians, Aboriginals, but there's a fence that runs through the middle of parts of Australia to keep rabbits out. So over here, you've got crops.
Rabbits were brought from England, and they were done they were non.
There were no predators. No predators for rabbits. They were brought from England, and they would invade crops and eat them like anything and get very big and fat. But it was a disaster for farmers. So they built this fence down through the middle of Australia called the Rabbit-Proof Fence. The film's really beautiful, but I won't go off on it too much. And on this side, we're cropping, and on this side is native forest, right? Notice the cloud formation, okay? That's an example of why trees are so important in rainfall, okay? I can. Take your time. I'm sorry it's so blurry, but I just wanted it.
I can see what
Yeah.
This should be posted on our site.
You can also say that the rabbit-proof fence never worked very well. Actually, the rabbits still somehow got on the other side and
Of course.
the crops.
Yes, but anyway, so here we go.
They tried. There's still plenty of rabbits there.
And I just wanted to put up this really beautiful proverb. You know, I don't think Indigenous people here were thinking about the science behind it, but they got it, right? They probably got it a lot better than many of us do. So what are the solutions? So the key solution here is afforestation, which means planting trees. A project by the Zero Emissions Research and Initiatives in Colombia originally what they were doing was planting trees to create carbon sinks, because you all understand that trees hold carbon, and so that's really important. But what happened was, after about 10 years, they noticed a 10% increase in precipitation in this Los Gavitos in Colombia. So trees were not only holding carbon, but they were increasing the rainfall in that area. And then they started to actually use the resin in the trees to produce a product that was bringing in more money. So what happened was, just by planting trees, the whole community of that area was benefiting economically, they were getting more rainfall, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So planting trees is really important for economic, social, and environmental reasons. Okay, and this is a point that I want to make. If you take anything away from this, this point is really important to me. What's really important, critical point there is that we have food for our communities. We are holding water in the soil, right? We are attracting rain clouds. We're providing income. We're doing so many positive things for that community. Sadly, a friend of mine's father is an organic apple farmer in Tasmania. He has a very beautiful apple orchard with something like 80 apple species, and he was cutting down trees that were 100-year-old trees that his father had planted, because he can't find people to buy all those organic apples right now. So Australia imports food like everywhere else from China, and so it's much cheaper for the local people to buy an apple in the supermarket that costs 50 cents instead of his organic apple that costs, $1 or $1.20 or whatever. So he chopped down a lot of these beautiful trees. But anyway, agroforestry is a really important way to solve problems. And again, if you've got land, it's something to think about. Yes?
I just want to say these trees are also habitat for all kinds of wildlife.
Yes,
and
thank
without
you.
the entire ecosystem and web of life, they won't work.
Exactly. It's a really beautiful point. So I'm not saying that these should be our only trees, but it's just a really important point in this era that we're in. Okay, I just had to throw this one out there. Everyone happy for me to move on? Okay, so the third defect, this is about water. I just sometimes think, well, Mother Nature's just had enough, all the things that we're doing to the planet. So I feel like part of the solution is getting back in touch with Mother Nature, going back home, finding our core inner being, and resonating with the planet. So planting gardens, developing cooperatives, which is a way of living together harmoniously without exploiting plants, without exploiting animals or other people, living locally, spiritual practices there, intentional communities. It's just a really important point to be with other like-minded people, because with other people, it's a really beautiful point that Charlotte made about inheritance issues, because these farms are being split up, and then you suddenly have a whole bunch of owners. Well, if everyone is on one piece of land together, trying to work it together with the similar intention of where we're going and what we're doing. And Charlotte, when you were talking about that manager they had to let go of, it was like you're not on the same page. So when you get an intentional community, you're all on the same page, you're trying to do the same things. And you can build that new world that we all want. So local empowerment, it's really important that we have say over our resources and how they're managed. Our water systems are in the land in that area, and the forests, respecting the earth. These things you all know, but resource management in the hands of local people. Take your time. Yes.
I think something really simple too is just understanding transparency in the food chain. Like it's something really simple to understanding where the food actually comes from and how much someone got paid to produce that food for you.
So the second half is, I'm still on the water topic, that doesn't really seem like it, but it's a beautiful point, and it will come up a little bit, so please feel free to speak to it. You know what I'd love is if you put your hand up, say your name, because we're not a huge group, and it's nice that we could get to know each other. Can you tell me your name? Alini.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. Okay, so thank you, Alini, for that. Okay, so now we're still on water, but this is the second issue. So the first issue was about not enough rain. And the second issue is the water that we do have, how we use it, okay? I'm sorry, I'm trying to organize this as best as I could, but anyway.
Doing very well.
Thank you, done. So, what do we do with the water that we do have? This is the point here, right? So how is that, so large industries are using water without necessarily having to pay for it and without necessarily taking care of it. There's no stewardship. If it's left dirty, so be it. There's nobody telling them that they have to clean up their mess. So I think everybody knows, oops, I'm sorry about that. Let me see here. Sorry, I'll get there. Everybody knows, oh God, that was about fracking. Okay, everyone knows that fracking uses a lot of water. This is just energy, types of energy and how much water that they use and projected rates. I'm going to happen to disagree with that because I'm confident that we're going to move more into green energy. If we look at the number of hybrids and electric cars that are out there now, I'm just really hopeful that, and the Tesla new, battery, that, this is so many exciting things, and people are, that's sold out all over the place. So there's the consumer demand, which I hope we keep up. But anyway, I just threw that up there. Okay, so animal agriculture, I am going to talk about it. It uses a lot of water worldwide. And this is the water used by irrigators. And then I think the interesting thing is the return with vegetables and fruit, we get the highest return. I am, I just think it's just something to think about, just things to bear in mind. I will say something about the beef industry. It does have a high footprint, but the important thing here is that people eat meat, it's a fact, and locally grown meats are so much better for the planet than when we get into factory farms and that big industrial picture. So it's, again, there's a lot more on this, but I'm not going to go into it right now. But just to bear in mind that when we do have meat, to get it locally grown in farms that are sustainable, and that's what's really beautiful there. Okay. So I say go vegetarian if you can. Maybe people aren't going to go fully vegetarian, but to think about sometimes, trying it once or twice or 3 times a week just to see if it's something that you can enjoy, and support green technologies. Okay, so the next defect in kind of the use of water is us, and we can say that the role of individuals or communities is so much less than the big industries. Of course it is. It's negligible compared to the big industries, but still, there are things that we can do on the individual level that reduce our use of water. So these are just things to bear in mind. Try not to leave the tap running when you're brushing your teeth, when you're washing your dishes. Put the plug in the sink, don't just run the water through, all those kinds of things. Use a what do you call this thing? A clothes washer, washing machine. Thank you. I'm from Australia, the last 9 years. What do they call it over here? A washing machine that's, has really good ratings for water use and energy use. Okay, so, solutions are, just mention them. Use a community pool if you don't want to fill your own. Composting toilets, shower with a friend, or turn the water off. Soap and then rinse. It's not that hard, and it saves gallons of water. Okay, so the last issue about water, the last key point is, so we've talked about lack of rainfall, we've talked about the water we do have, how we use it. Now we're talking about pollution, so this is really water quality. It's basically in many places no longer safe to drink, or it's drinkable, but it's not really healthy. It may have heavy metals, may have arsenic in it, may have chemicals, fluoride, and various other things. So we need to have regulations, I believe, cooperatives. So when local people own the resources of that area, they're more interested in how those resources are managed, and particularly things like water quality, because if somebody owns a business there, they don't want the runoff in that water because their kids are drinking it. So when we have locally run businesses, rather than the CEO lives in, the United Kingdom or Paris or Hong Kong, they don't care what happens to the water quality after industrial use. So when we can have more locally owned businesses, it's a really important way to have that stewardship that we were talking about at the beginning with the Indigenous Americans, that beautiful stewardship of the land and the resources. Make a stand against polluters, go green, and again, I'm talking about green energies, green technologies. And as we said, the use of plants and fish to keep that water clean. Okay, last point on water, and then we'll move to food. I'm really sorry it's dragging on, but I think we've still got a few more minutes. There's a debate about water rights. Should it be privatized? Should it be in public hands? Well, what about cooperatives is another way to manage water. In large scale use of water, you could have some kind of authoritative body, but it could still be run cooperatively. Okay, I'm going to move on just because of time. So now we're on to food. I can see that. Who wants to be a farmer?
I just became a business manager of a 6-acre farm.
That's totally awesome.
Random, in Malibu, random. This is going to be a big project.
Okay, fantastic.
So I'm so happy that I'm here with both of you.
It's really, really great. So, every day, 3 times a day, unless you're fasting, we need farmers. In Tasmania, we've lost 40% of our farms in the last 25 years, maybe more like 45%. And instead, and a lot of trees have been chopped down, they put up pine plantations. But it's a bit scary. Did you want to get a picture?
I'm going to send
Yeah.
this to my farm, to the farmer.
Yeah, you take
He
your time.
feels so underappreciated, all he does is complain.
Yeah. So, it's okay. So it's scary. We're losing farms, and what we're getting are these large corporations which are taking over the production of food. So here's some issues that farmers face, because again, this talk is about the climate change era. So everyone would get that, right? Okay. And so projected to 2095 is that drawing there of the soil. And you look particularly over towards the west, we're a little bit spared here, because as we saw in the Virginia stats, we're getting a fair bit of rainfall. So this is another take-home from this talk that I would really like to share with you all. One big picture is climate change. Now we're going to talk about the economy in terms of food and food security. So this is a relatively perfectly balanced economy, which if you think of these sectors of the economy as like legs on a stool, it's a fair few legs, but if we have a really good balance, the stool is strong, and we, the people, can sit on it. And in a balanced economy, we'd have, see, it's really hard to read this key. Yeah, let me see if I can see. So the one on the bottom is agriculture, and which includes logging and mining, and that's the big one, the 25%. So 10% of the population would be in service. The service is like policemen, firemen, administrators, government officials, blah, blah, blah. Another 10% are in general trade and commerce. It's retail, wholesale, all these kind of things. 25% would be in industry, just like manufacturing, that kind of thing. 15%, these are rough numbers, but in agro-industries, which is things like jam, clothing, things that you develop after harvest, right? Agrico-industries are the things used by farmers, so you have about 15% in that. That's seeds, tractors, fertilizer. And between 20 and 40% is the actual stat, because these are not numbers. Yeah, would be in agriculture. So probably the biggest percentage of the population. This is what I'd really like you to see. So we have 50% or so. So service and trade, it's the stats, I just looked them up 2 hours ago, just to make sure. So we have 82% in service and trade. I made up the division, but it's 82% in service and trade. They're, white collar jobs, right? That's a huge, now again, keep that image in your mind of a stool, right? Balancing on legs. You've got a very fat leg there. Then we
A
have,
very fat person on the stool.
that's us.
0.1%, yeah.
Then we have, the actual stat is 17% in industry, but manufacturing. Now, Dada and I discussed this before this presentation, as Dada was saying to me, manufacturing's gone to China. That's what's happened, right? We make a few things, but a lot of manufacturing's gone to China. So that's a problem too, because it's a problem for a number of reasons. It's a problem politically and blah, blah, blah. And we have, the total is 2% in agriculture. Okay, and that is all three of those parts of agriculture, which in the other slide made up to 60%. Okay, so that's an extremely skinny leg. Now, I just want to make the point now, because this is about food security. What happens if there's a plague of locusts and you've got a very small percentage of the population in agriculture with a non-diversified crop?
Monocrop.
Corn, soy, no bulgur, no, wheat berry, no, they're very few crops. And, well, we've got Monsanto to protect us, but, some bugs come in, some bug that we hadn't heard about arrives from Europe, or there's a plague or something like this, plague of locusts, and that crop's gone. When you have a lot of people in agriculture like this, you've got a huge diversity of things that we're growing. And so if something comes in, you've got some other crop that's going to survive. And those people are going to help grow that crop more quickly, and we're okay. And so having more people in agriculture is really important. And then I wanted to pick up on your point, Alini, that about foods that is imported or coming from far away. Something happens in transportation, Dada and I were discussing, and we can't do transportation for some reason. We have a 3-day supply of food in the United States. That's it.
This is FEMA, this is a natural disaster, right? They say, earthquakes, the bridges go down or something. Any kind of transportation problem that might occur, in 3 days, we run out of food in the homes, in the supermarkets, and in the distribution centers, everything. 3 days, they calculate, is our food security in this country, all over the country.
So this is the problem. When you don't have enough people in agriculture, we don't have the ability to provide the food that we need. Again, I could go on this, but I'm really conscious of time.
One
So,
other point that
yeah.
transportation is terribly harmful to the oceans, to wildlife, and to the entire climate change.
Sure. I'm going to keep moving. Please don't mind. There's so much we can discuss. Okay, so some downsides to chew food people. Did you see that picture? So we have the loss of there was the guy stressed out in his office in his white collar job, sitting in front of a computer all day, eating his not so healthy food. So we have the loss of connection with nature, obesity, and other health issues. When you're out on the farm all day, walking around, you get vitamin D, you get exercise, you're breathing in these beautiful smells, you're connecting with nature. Food security, we just talked about diversity of crops. Economies of scale, we can build economies of scale which help us. One problem is that we don't have enough people, who wants to be a farmer? We don't have enough people helping fight for farmers' rights. There was a story, Dada's beautiful book, I probably won't tell it right now, but maybe at the end when we have discussions, Dada can talk about that. And we start to depend on other countries for agricultural products. They send them in, they're cheaper, they compete, and so they're coming from long distances, and that's just got a whole number of environmental and economic issues. Okay, and on the flip side, if we do farm, we reconnect with nature, we improve our health and vitality. You guys can read these. So it's obviously the opposite of what we were just talking about. Okay, other concerns about food security. We're getting towards the end, which is good because we're running out of time. Everybody knows about what's going on with the bees. So it's now been definitively traced to glycosates that are in chemical, there have been scientific studies from Harvard and various different places that it is glycosates that are killing off our bees in Roundup, right? When we don't have our pollinators, that is a huge, huge, huge problem for food security. GMOs, why does this guy have to wear that when he's out in the corn? And that either goes to cattle, which then we eat, or it goes to us.
Correct.
Yes, that's really, really, really scary. There's lots we can say. Then there's our diet, Can we do something to create consumer demand for healthy, organic, really beautiful food? And once we have that consumer demand, then we start growing it more, right?
Delicious.
Exactly. And the final point I want to make, which is also a really important point, is that many of us believe that we are currently being hidden a bit by the government, but an inflationary depression. So the last depression in the late 20s, early 30s was a deflationary depression. Y'all understand the difference. Lots of job loss, but prices dropped, right? In this current era, we're having job loss, probably hidden more than people realize, but we're having inflation. So what that means is that food's getting more and more expensive. Have you noticed? Yeah, food, gas, everything that we need. And so when we're in an inflationary depression, it's actually much, much harder for people, and particularly people who might already be marginalized, people who didn't get a full education, people in disrupted homes, these kind of things. So it's an issue, and it's just something we should think about, because, it's not only that we have some issues with water shortages and different things that could be important about food security, but then are you going to have the money to buy it when it does become available? Do you understand what I'm saying? So, your dollar that bought a few things, or the $5 that bought a meal, will now buy, a couple of potatoes. I don't know. So, it's just a point to make. Yeah, I'm at the end. So some solutions, we're talking about building the new world. This is just now about food, and then I'll just wind up. Intentional communities, we talked about local food, farmers, producers, and consumer cooperatives. All three types of cooperatives. We don't have time to talk about it now, but more people involved in the ag sector, going organic, standing up about pesticides and GMO, invest in gold. Okay, so to summarize, this is the summary, I'm trying to sort of pull together from the whole talk. These were some of the points that I feel will help us with both food and water. There are a lot more, but I kind of threw those together quickly. And just to say thank you. We have a last couple of minutes, I think 1 or 2, not many, 5, I think, or 10, for questions, and that's for both Charlotte and myself. Questions, discussions, comments. So we're just here to, I'm sorry that I went late. Yes.
One of the last things you were talking about how the inflationary, well, I don't think the price of gas is going up actually in the last year.
Yeah, you're right. Yes, that's a real.
And that's been sort of artificially set in the Middle East because they don't want us competing.
Yeah.
And it's also to keep
Russia and Iran.
and also to keep our green energy from coming online. As well.
Yes, it's a really good point.
So there's a lot of forces in that are continuing to keep carbon-based fuels cheaper.
It's actually a really, really good point. I didn't really mean to say gas. I just was kind of blabbing.
Right.
Because I think that it's actually, the industry's in a lot of danger because of the hybrids and electric cars that are coming out, it may be that we won't need it. But food, food, let's hope for the best. These talks can be sort of depressing, but it's also just, food for thought. No pun intended.
Well, in America's culture, we don't spend a percentage.
We don't spend the percentage of our income on food like other countries do.
Yeah.
So that's another thing, is education.
Yeah.
I'm wondering how have you found direct marketing with what you're growing?
We have so much demand for our beef that, we can't, we're sold out constantly, so. And the reason my farm grass finishes the neighbor's beef because they don't know how to keep that much grass going. But we're managing our land so much better than they are that it takes 2 years to finish beef to the market, about 2 years. And so the problem we're having is that, we finish these beef, it takes 2 years, and then if your market is jerked away from you, you're sitting there with all this beef. And so it's difficult to have the good, humane slaughter, everything available, and we're still working on all that. So we could grow our business if we have better slaughter facilities, and I would rather have butcher shops to send half carcasses to rather than have to cut up and package in a slaughter facility. But everybody wants their meat perfectly packaged in either a square box or this box. It's just a lot of education and consumer changing to get it done. But it's sad that the affluent people can buy our beef. And
I'm not saying we shouldn't do it at all, but I feel like, there's lots of really nice plant proteins that we can eat.
I have obviously access to beef, and I probably don't eat it 3 times a week. But I also don't eat it when I go out because I don't know where it came from, and that really bothers me because regretfully I've had to visit a lot of slaughterhouses and learn a lot about that just because that's part of the business. And I thought if I die and go to hell, I'll be doing the slaughterhouse crap. But
that's right, and I appreciate you saying that, Charlotte. Yeah, it's, anyway. Anybody else? It's probably time. But
It's time.
Yeah, all right. Thank you so much.
Yeah.